Do board game ratings even freaking matter? The answer is no, they don't. My own personal ratings don't matter. Anyone else's personal ratings don't matter. Board Game Geek rankings, ratings do not freaking matter. But yet here I am talking about at the beginning of this news roundup video, hype, hotness, whatever you want to call it, the fact that one of the biggest topics of interest across social media this past weekend was, oh my gosh, Brass Birmingham just outperformed Gloomhaven. It's number one. It's number one. It's about as good as the preseason polls for like football and basketball, right? It's just a bunch of people randomly saying, hey, we think these are going to be, they're completely superfluous. They're completely fluff. They're, niche within a niche within a niche. And yet some people just gotta latch onto those and say, this is important. If you like the game, that's awesome. But if I'm introducing a game to somebody, I'm like, hey, guess what? This is the number one board game of all time, right? Like that's not gonna hold anything else. The main point, do you enjoy the game? Do you freaking like playing it? Do you want to play it again? Those above all else, I don't care who you are and what you like, that is what matters the most. Which brings me up into a different point, segueing into the other thing that popped up on Reddit this past week. Someone took a look at the chat GPT and they said, okay, let me compile, compared to what it was putting out there, the answer that they posed to them was, what are the Board Game Geek weightings? How heavy is a game? Again, like that freaking matters. But it very much was an interesting point because the listing of those games was very, very skewed one way, if you know what I'm talking about. Someone compiled the list over on Reddit. Only 32 of the 100 games had a weight under 3. 6 games had a weight under 2. Now, again, there's nothing to be, outraged about that either way, but a point I have been making since the beginning of this channel is Board Game Geek especially skews very heavy compared to the retail side of things. And I mean that in the most vague sense because it isn't a game for, this game is fun, this game is lightweight, this game is filler, this game is 30 minutes or less, right? These games range on average, I would say 2 hours or so for the majority of them that are on that list, at least. And that's not to say the 68 others that are above a 3.0 rating, they're probably averaging more than that. Again, say what you will, but that speaks very much of why it's hard to get people into the hobby when those are the things sometimes we value the most. Again, not saying that's a bad thing, but saying that if you're recommending games for other people to play, you don't start with things that fall under those categories is kind of more of my point with this. So anyway, what does that mean with the 1,874 days at the time of me filming this ruling of Gloomhaven over everything else on Board Game Geek? Well, it means that those ratings, again, to go back to the beginning, are totally worthless. Because I imagine in the next year or so, something else will jump into the top 5. Something else may even jump into the top 3. You may even see a new number 1 in the next year or two. But again, tend to be the people that are ranking games on there in the first place for a good portion of things, especially as you see, and that's the other point I'm going with this, especially in the heavier games tend to be more niche bias. You tend to rate games higher that you tend to like. The more niche the rankings are going to be. I guess what I'm saying is that what we tend to see is you tend to see the lighter games get more wide variety of people playing them than getting a wider variety of ratings. Whereas, you're not having a lighter gamer like me play a bunch of Brass Birmingham because obviously that's just not in my wheelhouse. But you have a little bit more of an overlap in terms of some of those lighter games. So because of that, you're going to have a higher variance, which is going to lead to a lower rating. Vice versa with the heavier games. You're going to have primarily only heavy gamers playing the heavy games that enjoy the heavy games in the first place. Selection bias there. That's, I guess, what I'm going with. So just food for thought when people bring that up as, wow, this is really impressive, or wow, this is really something. No, it's, purely subjective. Find games that suit your tastes. Find people like myself whose tastes are similar to yours and play games you love. Bottom line. Okay, now that we're done with that, let's go into the rest of the news, right? What else is going on? This is going to tie right into what's going on the Hotness, but that's why a couple of these games are on the Hotness this week. Holy freaking Grail Games is shutting down. They just announced with their most recent crowdfunding project, Rallyman Dirt, the sequel expansion standalone to the original Rallyman that they put out earlier on crowdfunding a couple years, I think before that they're just gonna be shutting down. So were you a backer? I hope not. Yeah, people expounded the virtues of that heavier type of racing game, and now we're gonna kind of see rubber meets the road, so to speak. The details are kind of unclear about what exactly has expired because transparency and business and money are being involved. So, there's some he said, she said. But the problem, I think, and this is sort of the issue that you're seeing nowadays, is you're going to have companies shut down because ultimately, I say this as a consumer. I have to look out for me, number one, right? Like when I do the crowdfunding roundups, I like talking about them supporting companies, but ultimately, I can't bankrupt myself to support businesses. And ultimately, that's what these are, right? These are businesses that need our, to stay afloat. And I think you end up with too many people that are not as familiar with the business acumen side of things that are necessary because we're so focused on our love or our passion for these projects in the first place. And especially over the pandemic era, cash flows all of a sudden starting and stopping and getting jacked up all over the place. And then, how do you balance that? How do you balance stock? Can you pay enough money to hold on to stuff until you can ship it? All of those issues, distributors, shipping, all of that has just created a havoc of things. And we've seen more than one bowling pin get knocked down. And chances are in the next, year or two, this isn't going to be the last one as well. So that's unfortunate because, Rallyman Dirt. Also, the other reason we're, seeing Encyclopedia on the Hotness is because that was the most recent one to deliver, which has all of a sudden become a hot commodity because it's a relatively well thought of, being well received dice worker placement resource management style game. I actually did a review on it for the campaign, so I have a copy. But what's going to become of some of those titles? Are they going to be sought after? Are they going to not? Are some people going to get picked up elsewhere? Like we've seen with a few of the other failed projects. Onimaru. But that's going to be the big question. How and what ripples does that have across the board? Because we just saw, and I talked about it a video or two ago on this, Fun Again Games shutting down their distributing side of things. It seems like almost every video I talk about one way, shape, or form of this happening. I don't like talking about this aspect of things either, but I have to talk about it at the same time. It's important. So what else is out there? What else has been announced? What else has recently come to light? And what else do we know about? Well, if you're not familiar with it, you are familiar with it now. Dead Cells, the board game, the roguelike video game, is being ported over to the tabletop. Have you heard me talk about video games being ported to the tabletop at all in the past? Oh, I don't think I have. Yeah, I talk about it again. Like every single news video, we hear another IP that's being released in that sense. Similarly, we're seeing a Gears of War card game come out from Steamforged. This is happening, folks, repeatedly. Boom, boom, boom. But the real question is, are they going to be good? How much attention is going to be given to the detail that these games are going to require? How true are they staying while still offering some creative license to be appealing to more than just the IP-based interest crowd? La Scorpion Masque, I'm mispronouncing the French name, as usual. I mispronounce one thing per video, is putting this game out. And this is a point to be coming to crowdfunding. And it's going as a dungeon crawl cooperative roguelike, because I believe the video game is actually just a solo game. So the fact that they're doing a sort of a la Slay the Spire with a 1 to 4 cooperative experience instead makes me wonder how they're going to do this, because they're saying gameplay is only going to clock in about 45 minutes per scenario. Explore, kill, die, mutate, repeat, rinse, and do over, right? Just with the recent announcement, we've already seen 8,200 followers on the Kickstarter pre-launch page, which again is relatively insane for something that was literally just announced within the last week and a half. And the interesting thing here is Scorpion Masque has no previous crowdfunding projects. And so that's going to be an interesting test. Contention Games, say what you will about whether or not the product is right for you or not. They put out a very serious, high level, we've done our research, crowdfunding campaign. And overall, even as a person who didn't end up backing it, I was impressed by what they put out there and the interest that they were able to garner. Now, granted, it's a huge IP and there's a huge amount of interest in it. So, you know, I would hope that there would be, but that's what I'm talking about, is the attention to detail that's needed with this. And you can see, again, it says right over here, coming soon. What does soon mean? Because some of these companies do not announce things much off in advance. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you saw this in the next month. That's how soon I think you could see something like this. Now, granted, it would probably be good to build up some hype, to build up some anticipation, and not just launch on a random Tuesday or Wednesday without, you know, so much fanfare. But I'm going to guess we're still going to get about a week's worth of advanced knowledge. You choose one of 4 characters, you're exploring your paths, sprawling, changing castles, sort of like what they wanted to do, I think, with more of the Bard Song from Steamforged. You're killing your enemies because each character class has unique powers, unique action deck that you're going to be going through. You only need to pick out 1 card to cover 3 phases of a fight, which is a really cool mechanic. Then, similar to Slay the Spire in that sense, when you die, you're going to regenerate, you're going to mutate, you're going to gain power-ups, sort of a la even the Hades sort of situation, to allow you to go better, further, farther, faster, deeper, deadlier. And that's what the game brings. Can it do it as well as you need it to do? Because again, the big advantage of these games on the video game side of things is, you know, boom, 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 repeat, 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 short period of time. Board games tend to slow things down across the board, but that's going to be the challenge. And that was my big concern about Slay the Spire is, you know, Slay the Spire, the advantage of doing those battles, you know, it turns out it's a very quick turnover, right? You play the whole game in like 45 minutes. If one battle is going to take you 30 minutes, you know, it loses the feel and the appeal of the video game in the first place. And I hope that this can replicate the video game side of things on the tabletop. So I'm going to be watching this one very closely. The next one up that we're going to go slightly adjacent with as well is the next in the Forbidden series. This one is actually Forbidden Jungle from Matt Leacock, you know, Forbidden Sky being the most recent one, which it was sort of met with some mixed opinions about how people felt about it. But Forbidden Jungle, a little bit heavier than the island and the desert. And so I think this one could be a little bit, hopefully a little bit more broader appeal than Sky. Sky was very, you know, focused in, I think, the appeal that it was going for. And so I would love to see what this has, you know, as a different setting. You crash land in the jungle, you need to work together to survive. Search ruins, abandoned outposts, and trying to find the escape portal. And there's going to be creatures and escalating chain of collapsing locations. So again, not a whole lot of other information, but someone who's loving a little bit slightly harder co-ops, or even a slightly harder family level co-op for my burgeoning 7 and 9-year-olds, I think this one is going to heavily get some interest when it eventually comes to retail. Next one up, I mean, I've covered it on crowdfunding, board game tables, all play, whatever you want to call them now, whatever you're more familiar with calling them, Sail. This is the one I'm backing on their crowdfunding campaign currently. This is the 2-player cooperative trick-taking game where you direct your boat away from the Kraken towards areas that are going to help you win the game. This one looks like, to me personally speaking, the most solid one that they have put out since Kabuto Sumo. Now, I like me some Factory Funner more than Kabuto Sumo, but the wider mass appeal one is Kabuto Sumo, and that's what this one does for me personally, because I don't have any 2-player cooperative trick-taking games. Like, I've got the 2-player competitives, I got the multiplayer competitive trick-taking games, but something that my wife and I can play on a cooperative team where, you know, she's not getting angry at me for me losing a game again that I've taught her. So that's why I'm interested in it. And it just looks like something that's not too heavy. It's not going to be playing too long, and it just fits all of that niche that I'm looking for, as well as a good price point. So that's why that one is on the hotness. Now, the next one up, The Last Kingdom. Speaking of IPs, now we're seeing movie TV series is coming over. I mean, we haven't really seen anything since Warehouse 13, let alone your BSGs. So that is even more rare than, say, a good video game tabletop game. The interesting standpoint is that it's from Gamelin Games. I would not have guessed, you know, given their previous IPs and their previous, well, just other games, that this would be coming from them, but it is. It's a 2 to 5 player battling as the Brits or the Danes, and again, more of a political rather than just a strict area control. So there's going to be some diplomacy, there's going to be some tactics, there's going to be some strategy, there's going to be some betrayal. 10 asymmetric leaders, drafting cards to be able to play over 2 big rounds to maneuver your army to win the battle. The ever interesting pass but you're not out mechanic. But if everyone passes and you get your bluff called there, then the round ends. Brings a very interesting dynamic to a game like this that I could see, as someone who has no attachment to the IP, more than just a strict area control game with a little bit of, meta back and forth with card play. Okay, you got me just by the Board Game Geek description. I'm more interested in it now, just talking to you off the cuff before I was making this video even. So we're going to see what comes of this when it finally comes out. But that's going to be the question, right? There's no indication on retail versus crowdfunding at this point, but I would guess maybe retail overall, because with an IP like this, I think you could get more on Kickstarter crowdfunding, but I just don't necessarily see it going that way, at least me personally, and I'm happy to be wrong either way because I'll cover it either way. So that one's on your radar as well now. The other big one that just got announced is Cyclades. That is getting the Kemet treatment, and by that I mean they're going to be putting out a new legendary edition, a new remastered edition, essentially, on crowdfunding in the near future. Now, they say Q2 of this year, but, Q2 starts in like 5 weeks. So that's not really that far off either. 3,300 people already following on the pre-launch page, and it says the description basically being an ultimate evolution of this famous development, territory control, and auction board game by the master Cathala himself. So we're going to see what this sort of has in store for us, right? It's listed on Board Game Geek, but there's not full details of exactly what's going to be new and what's going to be different. It's probably going to be a little bit like the Kemet. How much exclusive do you make with a situation like this with people that already love it? Similar that Bezier has done to, say, Castles of Magic and Ludwig or Suburbia. I mean, that's going to be sort of the question. How do you split that aspect? Or do you just, go full bore and you just make it available at both? You just jack up the price like Queen and Bezier have done at the retail if you don't back on crowdfunding. Again, no judgment, but say what you will. They say there's going to be the classic mode, 3 to 5 players. Each player defends their own interests. There's going to be a team mode for 4 or 6. That's a pretty interesting player count. Teams of 2 cooperating with one another and competing against the other teams. And then also an enhanced and quote unquote refined two-player mode with an auction bidding. Does that mean you're going to have a ghost player? That's a little bit vague to me. I would be a little concerned about having a ghost player in any time you have an auction or a bidding sort of mechanism. That doesn't always work well, and it's very hard to do very, very well. And I guess the other question is, for previous owners, are you going to be able to just upgrade? Or are you going to have to get a whole new product? Your mileage may vary, and that may leave a bad taste in your mouth depending on which side of the aisle you fall on in that taste. Now we have, again, I'm going to talk about it, Expeditions from Stonemaier. Still no information, slowly trickling out, but there's really only the prototype that Jamie has, and so nobody else has really seen it or played it at this point that I know of, at least the time of me filming this. And so, I imagine more information is going to trickle out, but as a game that's not shipping for, 3, 4, 5 months yet at this point, I don't expect to hear a lot more, but I expect to get it trickled out as they've done with other releases. So we'll slowly, gradually get enough information, but the pre-orders actually end this coming week. So we'll see how that affects things or the timing of some of that information. I'd love to see more information, but ultimately this is a game that I don't need deluxeified. So if anything, it's going to be a heavy retail pickup for me. Just by the nature of myself. But if you're not, this might be your last chance to get in on one of the more early editions, early copies, to catch the gravy train of the hype and the hotness, be it, the person that shouts the forum sections first or the comment section down below. I see you guys. Don't think that I don't. But then the other usual hotness on Board Game Geek is relatively the same. We've got a little bit of Seven Wonders Edifice that I covered previously that I said was going to be coming out this month on the retail roundup of the top games coming out at retail this month. Horseless Carriage is being delivered, and so that's getting hyped from Splatter as well. And then we have obviously your usual suspects of Arc Nova, Heat Pedal to the Metal, which is still rising rapidly up the charts and is going for way too much money on the secondary market. It's a great game. It's a top 10 game of 2022, folks, but do not pay twice the retail price to get it. Await the reprint. And then Frosthaven is still fulfilling, and they are finishing out their fulfillment obligations at this point. So that will inevitably still stay on the hotness for quite some time. And, is that going to be the thing to unseat Brass, going back all the way to the beginning of the video? at the #1 spot eventually? Or will it be something like Oathsworn, or Dwellings, or Andromeda's Edge, or take your pick? But that's why we talk about it, because it's still fun, even though it's meaningless, right? But that's all I got. That's all I got right now. So that is the news roundups and everything else you need to know that's been going on in this past week and a half, whatever it was since the last time I did this video, and who cares? It's just fun to do them regardless, and I like talking about board games, so that's why I do them. That's all I got. No ramble at the end here. Enough rambling in the video for you guys, so stay classy. Thanks for watching in. Thanks for helping me get to 7K. Video giveaway coming very soon. Tune in. You'll like it. Trust me. That's all I got. Have a great day.